Good morning and welcome to the channel. Today I'm doing something a little bit different. I want to create more videos for the channel, but being able to do a knitting podcast once a week makes no sense. I can't get enough knitting in to make it worthwhile. So I thought I would do some studio vlogs. I do other videos occasionally anyway, so this is just kind of part of that in any case. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about my autumn knitting plans. We are just at the beginning of September now, and I get really enthusiastic at this time of year about knitting and projects and want to cast on everything. I love seasonal and theme knitting, so all the autumn knits, all the Halloween knits, Christmas knits, all that sort of thing. No Christmas knits here, this is all autumn stuff, and I have September, October, November to get through as much as I possibly can. Apologies if the camera wobbles at all. I'm leaning on the table. I'll try not to, but if I do, it's going to wobble the camera because I'm not using my tripod today. I've got a precarious pile piled up. So I'm going to work through and show you the patterns I would really like to knit and the yarns that I'm hoping to use for them, and also briefly a couple of the cast-ons I've already started, one of which I already showed on the podcast, which is the Red Moon Sweater, and also a pair of autumn socks, which are halfway through already. Okay, I have one garment cast on already, and I have I'm sure there's three garments that I would like to cast on. I will probably not get through them all, but I would like to at least get part way through and at least get a couple of them finished as well, but we'll see how we go. I have a mixture of yarns. I have indie dyed yarns, I have commercial sock yarns, I have old vintage yarns, all sorts, so there's quite a selection to choose from. First of all, I will briefly show you the sweater I've already cast on, and it is the Red Moon Sweater by Born and Raised Knits, and I will talk more about that, and I have talked more about that on my most recent podcast, which is number 22, and I will talk more about it in the next one, 23. I am using two commercial yarns for this, and I have just dropped a stitch or three. Oh, bear with me. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I think I've dropped a couple of them. I'll have to pick those back up afterwards. Anyway, I have used charcoal and orange for mine. This is upside down, so you're going to struggle to see. Let me pop it that way. And as you can see, it has moons on it. It has crescent moons and full moons at the top of the sweater. And I've just started the second chart, which has got these little very large moon phases on as well. I've used the leftover orange drops alpaca from making a Halloween cardigan last year, which was completely in orange, which was the Ichabod cardigan by Andy Satterland, and I'm pairing it with a charcoal in the same base, again drops alpaca, 100% alpaca, to make this Halloween colour inspired sweater. So although that garment is already cast on, I have three others that I would like to knit if possible. That one is a fingering weight, and there are two other fingering weights. Fortunately, they're not all fingering weight. This is the Arboreal by Jennifer Steingass. I bought this pattern 3 years ago maybe, but it is a colourwork yoke, and it is knit in DK8 yarn. For this I decided to go with a tweedy yarn, so I've gone with Drops Soft Tweed in the colourway Carrot Cake, I believe it's called, and it pretty much is. It looks a little lighter on camera, but in real life it really is the colour of carrot cake, the cake flesh itself, and I'm going to pair it with cookie dough in the same range. So they're not overly high contrast. I didn't want, say, an undyed yarn held in the colourwork and it'd be very bright in your face. I wanted a little bit more subtlety. I've been really liking seeing other people's projects where they've done colourwork and there are contrasts, but it isn't high contrast, and I'm doing that with the other sweaters that I've got here too. So although they do contrast, it won't be a stark contrast. So that is DK weight, so that won't take quite as long as the other sweaters. What I plan to do is get through the colourwork on a yoke of one sweater so that it gets to the stockinette stage, so that I can just mindlessly knit whilst watching TV, and then I can cast on another colourwork yoke for doing when I want a bit more thinking time, which is basically if I'm doing any knitting in the daytime and say watching YouTube or watching other podcasts and things like that, then that's when I generally do colourwork. I do sometimes on an evening in front of the TV, but if I'm tired I just want stockinette. So that's sweater number 2. Sweater number 3 is a little bit more complicated. It is the Nightfall, I believe it's called Skumrik, I think, in Norwegian, cardigan by Ellie of Skein Knits. It has colourwork in the yoke at the top and colourwork on the bottom of the cardigan too, and it uses a gradient of colours for the body and fades into them. It's supposed to use 5 colours, 4 colours in the body and 1 for the rib. I'm going to be using 3 colours in the body and 1 for the rib because I want to use some yarn, indie dyed yarn, both of my own hand dyed yarn, Mad Madamel yarns, and some yarns that I got from Perth Yarn Festival a couple of years ago by Gillian of Mothie and the Squid. So the yarns I plan to use are, if I put them in order, these are not going to stack very well. Maybe they will. And I have a little ball of that as well. So they are these yarns. It's blowing out. I'm having to use a studio light today, so it's blowing out a little bit, but they're pretty close. A little bit darker than what they're showing on screen. So these 2 in the middle are from Mothie and the Squid, and they are a tweed yarn. I believe they are BFL. No, they're Superwash Merino, 85% and 15% Donegal Nep tweed. Originally I was going to use these for a shawl, and I cast on the Boyagi shawl by, is it Knit Boop? If it's not Knit Boop I'll put it on the screen. But they weren't contrast enough to show the stitch detail, so I frogged that out and used some other yarn I got from Perth Yarn Festival from Orlan Yarns and saved this for something else. Now they're highly speckled, great, lovely autumnal colourways. They are specifically part of her autumn range. The green is Autumn is Coming, and the orange, the label is somewhere. I will put the colourway on the screen. I can't remember, something about gourds, I believe. The other yarns are Mad Madamel yarns in Nephrite Jade and Pumpkin Picking. Now, Pumpkin Picking, this skein is an oops skein. It is more orange in the background than would normally be. Normally it would come out more like this, which is not going to focus very well with my face on screen. But there is difference between them, which is fine because it just ends up more yarn in my stash. But works very well with this yarn here. And this green has orange in it, and obviously this one doesn't. So my plan is this ball, I'm hoping there is enough on this to do the trees on the bottom of the cardigan. And what I will find out is how many trees are on the pattern for my size, and I will do a swatch, colourwork swatch with 1 or 2 repeats of it, knit the whole chart, work out how much yardage I've used and work out how much yardage I have left, and hopefully there is enough. If not, I will just have to set aside a little bit of this to go in the chart. And the plain semi-solid green, the Nephrite Jade, I will use for the top little bit of colourwork. There are 3 shades used in the colourwork chart. The very darkest at the top, the middle and the bottom, and it's not going to focus very well with me on screen. And I will use the darkest just in the top section, and I will use it for all the rib on the cardigan. The other 3 colours, these 3, I will use up all, if not almost all, if not all of it, through the body of the cardigan, and I will fade into all 3 of them. So that is the Nightfall cardigan. The final sweater that I want to cast on is one that I just came across, and it's a brand new one from a new designer called Lacey Williamson of Windward Farm, and she came out with this colourwork yoked sweater which has pumpkins in the yoke. And so I dug around in my stash and I wanted to keep the colours very similar, so I still have a bunch of drops of flora in shade green, number 15, left over from knitting the flax sweater for my husband, so I'm going to use that for the green section. I have this shade, which was originally for some colourwork wristies about 5 years ago and still haven't got around to knitting, so I'm going to use that for the darker sections. I've got a ball of this in peachy pink, which I bought specifically to go with these bases, these other yarns for the pumpkins. And I will do the background colour in this one, which I believe is beige, which is number 7. So they'll be all in the same base. All the colour work will be in these 3 shades and the body in that shade. So it'll be a nice subtle light colourwork sweater, and this drops flora I believe is a mixture of alpaca and wool, so it'll be very warm and very lightweight and just something a little bit more delicate. Although it's autumnal themed, it's not just the typical browns and such like of all the rest of the stuff. Okay, onto socks. I have already cast on 1 pair of socks and I'm flying along because it's in DK weight. Last year I knit a pair of socks in this yarn, which is very raggedy because I'm getting towards the end of the yarn, but it is Novita yarn, and the colourway eludes me, but it is a DK weight sock yarn. DK weight sock yarns are a little more tricky to come across actually commercially. But I knit a pair of socks with these last year with orange contrast toes and heels. Very similar to the orange that's in there. It was a bit brighter, more of a neon orange. This year I am knitting them more harvesty tones. So I've used the same yarn there, but I've used a burgundy contrast for the toes and the heels. And it's my basic toe up formula, except on the top of the sock and the ankle of the sock I am using the blueberry waffle sock pattern. So it's stockinette on the bottom, and then once you get up to the ankle it is blueberry waffle pattern all the way around. I've partridge heel turn and Turkish cast on for the toes and their toe up. And I'm really loving the combination of the burgundy with these socks. It makes me think of September harvest time, Mabon time, and harvesting apples and plums and things like that. So I'm really loving them. And like I said, they are flying along because they're a DK weight. So that's my first autumn socks. I have more autumn socks and Halloween socks. First one I would like to knit is this one. They are so Halloweeny and over the top. They're stripy orange and black with pumpkin colourwork on the heels, which is great because it makes a change from doing just like a slip stitch heel, because colourwork you're using 2 strands alongside each other, so it's going to work up not as sturdy but pretty good. What I'm using is I'm going to use the Cascade Heritage I have left over from last Halloween from knitting another pair of socks. I used this for contrast toes and heels and I have a lot of it left. It only used 15 grams, I believe, for the last pair of socks. I have quite a lot of this, and I will use it just with a plain black sock yarn for the black stripes and the pumpkins. It is a merino nylon, which I'm not the biggest fan of for socks, but I think it'll be fine. I will just have to put some extra slip stitches on the ball of the foot to reinforce it. So that's socks to be cast on number 1. Second socks to be cast on is the A Little Hocus Polka Socks by This Handmade Life, and this is a free pattern on Ravelry, or I'm not sure if you can get it elsewhere, but it's a free pattern. It is a cable, I know I don't like cable design sock. There is a small cable up one side, and I just thought they were really pretty. It's almost like a Celtic chain cable. It's probably not the right term, I'm just making that name up, but that's what it makes me think of. So I'm going to use Drops Fable for that in colourway 110, which is this kind of rusty colour. And I wasn't sure if I was going to do contrast toes and heels, but I think I will, and I will use this, which is Regia Eco Line, which has recycled polyamide in for the nylon, and those two together I just thought looked really, really nice. They're kind of autumnal. They're not as high contrast as they look on screen because they're both slightly softened colours. This is a soft rust and this is kind of a soft forest green. So together they look really, really nice. So yeah, I plan to make those. I also, last year I made a pair of socks with this yarn, which is King Cole Zigzag, and I loved this yarn. I wouldn't consider myself a gamer, but I do play at one game called Guild Wars 2, and at Halloween there is an event takes place, and in one of the main areas, city areas, it gets all Halloweeny, and the colours of this just reminded me of the area called Lion's Arch at Halloween. So I love this sock yarn, and I did contrast toes and heels with this yarn last year, but this year I want to use it for something different. So I want to use it for the Bleather socks, which are a slightly textured sock, which have garter ridges and such like in. And as for contrast toes and heels, I am going to use, I almost always do contrast toes and heels. I'm going to use Cascade Heritage again, I know it's more merino, in purple, because there are sections of violet purple in this yarn. So I'm going to do, it looks quite blue there on screen, it is violet. Violet contrast toes and heels for the Bleather socks, and I should have enough yarn. I should have plenty. Maybe I'll have enough for 2 pairs of socks. I can't remember how much of this I have left. I know this one I only had 52 grams left over, so there is only enough for a second pair of socks with contrast toes, but that's a DK weight and it doesn't go quite so far, but fingering weight goes quite a long way. So that's yet another pair of socks. Now the next 2 patterns, the last 2 patterns, I can't decide, so you might have to help me with this one. I have 2 patterns and 2 yarns. The first pattern is the Cozy Autumn Socks, again by This Handmade Life, and as you can see it's kind of like a lace patterned sock. The second one is another lace patterned sock, and it is Autumn Fires by La Maison de Saba. I've probably completely mispronounced that, but it has a leaf lace design on it. They're not focusing very well. There we go. It has these leaves on it. The 2 yarns I would like to use are Rico Superbar or Superba, I never know how to pronounce, vintage, in this variegated, slightly like a soft coloured, autumn coloured variegated yarn. And the second one is a vintage yarn that I picked up years ago by Sunbeam St. Ives, and the colour is kind of like a brown with little bits of tweedy blue in it. It's unusual. It's kind of bluey green flecks. It's quite unusual. Anyway, so I can't decide between these two. This one's going to show pattern and not so well. This one will show pattern up better, and I'm not sure which one will need it more. Either the Cozy Autumn, which lace, or the Autumn Fires, again lace, but I don't know which one is going to come out more distinct. Maybe I will do the Autumn Fires in this one to really show the leaf shape, because otherwise it might just look lacy without showing the actual leaves. And the Cozy Autumn, which are lacy but less of a specific shape, with the Superba. So let me know what you think in the comments, and I need to decide what to do with those. Okay, so hopefully I'll be back next week with another episode, probably the podcast, if not another studio vlog of some description. But I'm going to say goodbye now because my camera is just about to die. And so yeah, I shall see you soon, and don't forget to let me know in the comments what you think about the two patterns and what I should do. Okay, goodbye.